I'm here with KG Watson today, author of Acts of Remembrance, which we're so pleased to present to all of you. And we're going to talk about how the book came to be, how Ken met Angelina, who is also a co-author and the person with the World War II Diaries, and why we should remember during this Remembrance Day. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Pleasure to be here.
And I'm really excited to talk about this book because it was such an interesting work in progress of how this book came to be, and also how all of the stars aligned for it, and how all the pieces came together for this book to come about. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I can tell you a lot about that. I joke about seniors being asked for short stories. Bad idea. Angelina was at she lives in a retirement home in Grimsby. I was asked to go there and speak about writing stories. And while there was a lot of interest in listening to stories, she was the only one who put up her hand and volunteered that she had already written a book. Oh my goodness, I was so excited about that. And I asked to see it, and she invited me to see what she had. They were 4 scribblers, the kind that you would get in early primary school when you're learning to write. And these scribblers were filled from edge to edge on the page, from top to bottom. There was not an empty space. Oh, that said somebody was short on paper, and that just leapt off the page at me. Now, Angelina said that these were the diaries that she had written as a teenager. She was 12 to 16, and she was living in Holland at the time, and the time was 1940 to 45. Oh, I mean, as soon as she told me that, I thought, holy smoke, that I should ever be able to handle something that valuable. And she was offering to let me look at them. I was overwhelmed, really. And first thing, I couldn't read a word. It's all in Dutch. But the dates are all there, and I knew exactly what this looked to me like Anne Frank #2.
Wow.
And I thought, holy smoke. So, Angelina, what are you doing with these? Oh, she said, well, my daughter lives in Edmonton, and it's really hard for her to think about doing anything. And we've had a visitor or two, and they don't come back. They look at them, and oh, I thought, oh my goodness. Anyway, she continued, what would you do with them? Be still my heart. Well, the first thing that should happen to something this old and this fragile is it should be photocopied. And she said, well, would you do it? Sure. Here. And I mean, here are documents that she has protected her whole life. She's 90 years old plus, and she has carried these things across the world. She has saved them from every cleanup and clean out. And all right, this is reverent stuff for me. So I did photocopy them, and I then brought them back and said, okay, there you go. These can be put away safely now, and you can work with those. I presume you're going to write what they say. Oh, she said, my hands are so crippled up with arthritis, and I don't type at all anymore. All of these were handwritten, by the way.
Wow.
And she said, and I can't do computers. Would you write my story? Angelina, I am flattered, but I'm sorry. I cannot write your story. I can write a story, my story about your story, but I can't be you.
That's right.
So she said, all right, when do we start? Okay, well, I was headed off on one of those bucket trip cruises of the Rhine River and the Moselle River. And I said, well, look, I can't start until, and the second thing is, I don't have anybody to translate this. Could you read them? Oh, that's pretty hard for me. All right. Okay, I'm going to opera practice tonight. I know there are 3 guys at least there in the opera chorus who are fluently Dutch and English. They're bilingual, and so I'll ask there. Out of the 3, 2 said, no, I simply can't do this. I work for a living, and this would take a lot of time. The one guy said, oh, you are asking a big ask here, because this wakens all sorts of awful memories for me. I too lived through that late war situation, and it's an awful thing to recall. However, he said, she has saved these. It's up to me to do it. I'll do it. I'll put new locks on those old memories and put them away again, but
wow.
We'll do this. So he began, while we went off on our cruise, he began to translate the Dutch into English. He was meticulous in that. And he wanted to be sure that in the time since he left there, and he got the right nuances to every word. Also, language changes. 1940 Dutch isn't the same perhaps as today. And so anyway, on the trip, it was a burden to me to think of, holy smoke, how do I write a story about this lady's life? I have no background on this, so I asked our tour guide on the ship, and he said, well, do you know about the Verzet's Museum? No. Well, he made me an appointment. The day I got off the boat, I was in Amsterdam. I was in the Verzet's Museum. It's talking to the director, and Mr. Blom said, yes, we would love to have these pieces in our collection.
Wow.
And why don't you take a look through the displays downstairs, and that will give you enough background. There was also books in their bookstore. A couple of them were in English, and that was really, really helpful to give me the perspective from which these books of Angelina's were set. So
wonderful. That is such an amazing story.
Yeah, that it should all happen like that was truly amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I got back, Al was busy with this translation, and we got at it, and we would go down and say, okay, tell me about a little more about this part. Have we got this translated correctly? Did we get the right understanding from this story? And we made it to just after Christmas, when Al was found dead in the morning. He had been playing soccer
wow.
3 days before.
My goodness.
When his wife woke up in the morning, he was dead on the floor in the...
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. All of us are so sorry to hear that. And, you know, someone such a big part of this book, too. That is so awful. And, you know, even for him to be able to say that he would begin it is such a gift. So.
Yes. Well, he set the standard. He set
Yes.
the bar. And when I asked Angelina, what are we going to do now? And she tried to read the stories, and then it moved from translation to something else. So she would read and say, oh, this is the story about. And she would start to tell me the story with no reference to the paper. All right, you get a richer story that way. There's stuff not on the paper, but it isn't translation. And for those who get fussy about that, I wanted to make that really clear. So that was, it wasn't a problem to me, but it became for her because she would read the story and then she'd start to talk to me in Dutch, and I was the only person in the room who was not bilingual.
Right.
So she brought in a friend of hers who helped out, and the two of them would talk about what there was on the paper. They each had their own copies, and I was sitting in the middle with my iPad, typing frantically like somebody at a ping pong match, watching what everybody was saying and getting it onto into the computer. At the very end, COVID interrupted. I was actually on my way to visit her for the final correction of the manuscript, and while I was in the car on the highway, the building was locked up. So I got there. There's a big sign, and and the desk across the door, and you can't come in. I asked if she could now then just hand me the manuscript that she had been working on to correct, and they took that message to her in the dining room. She came whizzing by. She is in a wheelchair at present, and upstairs she went to get the manuscript. I thought she was gone a bit longer than I was wondering. And now she came, but she's dressed in a coach. And she said, well, if you cannot come in, then I will go out. And she directed her helper to, please go and put chairs there at that table, and we will sit there. And it was, what? Well, they hadn't come up with the rules yet.
Yes, yeah.
for the residents. And so, all right. So we kept our distances on the patio, and I again was making corrections as quickly as I could. And after an hour and a bit, we were done, and she went back in, and she was chilly, but she was happy that the corrections that she had made on her copy of the manuscript were now in the one that was going to the press. And so now that is when the next collection of people started to do handsprings. And this was in March that we were doing it, and it had to go to get a cover put on it. It had to have the art approved. It had to be edited. It had to be printed, and then it had to be, brought from wherever to here. And we made it, and I think you're the one that deserves all the credit on that one, because I think you must have moved mountains to do that. The target was to have it available for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Holland, and we made that target.
Yes, we did. Oh my goodness, Ken, why did you decide to take on a project like this? Why was it important?
Oh, well, I think remembrance is a precious thing, and it is something we are to do. I think that people should be concerned about their history, I guess, simply so they can talk to their elders. I mean, I was blessed by growing up with grandparents who were alive while I was able to ask, and not everybody is, but older people lived through events that have shaped current times, and the stories that they carry are not recorded in any history books. These are people who lived day to day at those times, and that's what they want to talk about. That's what they are skilled at talking about. And so that's one reason why remembrance is an important thing to pursue, because it lets you talk to seniors. You also don't need to feel alone. In current times, boy, I hear how much anxiety and how much depression is afoot in our communities. Imagine if you had all of that and war too. These people solved that problem. We do not have to resurrect the solution to loneliness, to depression. Other people have done it before, and in the process of studying history, you can find that. We can also reflect on an outside voice from past times, evaluating our current practices. I think that's really useful, but you have to be able to accept that back then they had similar difficulties and this is how they solved them. So let's look at what you're doing. And if you're finding that, hey, this isn't working out, well, maybe they had solutions that could be implemented today. And I think that's another reason. I also sort of think that it is a duty. It is like everybody wants to be a Canadian citizen. Right. Okay, it doesn't come free. You bring something, you bring your past. Everybody brings his past into Canadian times now. And if you don't do that, if you're not able to bring that history into modern day discussions, it's like cutting pieces out of a quilt, right? I mean, it's no surprise that it looks tattered and it doesn't keep anybody very warm. So I think that is a duty of citizenship, to remember your history and your place within the national. Okay, we owe that to ourselves and to those who went before. The past also gives us perspective. It's so easy these days to look at what happened this month, last month. If you ask 3 years ago, heaven's sakes, who remembers that far back? Okay, the historical perspective can provide a lens that helps to focus on, it gives you a perspective. Yeah, look what's happened over time. And over those times, then, how have we changed? And whereas the immediate objective, the effect of a single change a few weeks ago, you can say, well, I'm not sure that means anything. But when you put it into the historical perspective, you see a trend, and that's something you can start to bet on. So if you don't like the trend, fix it.
That's right.
Anyway, that's the sort of thing that I thought of when we got busy with Angelina's book. And that's why I thought, this is so important. I am probably the only one in the world who could do this.
Amazing.
And I thought, wow, that's kind of special.
Very special.
So,
now, Ken, was there a story in Angelina's book that touched you more than others?
Oh.
Was there one that stood out for you specifically? And can you tell us about that and why?
Yes, I can. And I was, there it is. Yes, it is the story in 1945 of Christmas. And you have to realize that by the time you have gone through 5 years of war, all of your reserves are gone. The extra sugar you put away got used up 3 years ago. You're just hand to mouth now. And so they came to Christmas in 1945. This was not in the journal. She just told me this word of mouth, and this is how she remembered it. She said, nobody had anything. If you had money, there was nothing to buy in the shops. By then, people had traded off everything of value. And at age 15, and her 13-year-old brother, they decided to play Santa Claus. It's Sinterklaas in Dutch. They were going to do that for the 6 and the 8-year-old children. Now, these would be kids who knew nothing but war. Nothing but destitution. Well, they found a black bow tie in a leftover stock from their dad's store. And that would be a joke for the boy, okay? That the aim of Sinterklaas gifts is to be sort of funny, humorous. For his younger sister, Angelina took one of the brass curtain rings off the rod in their living room that held up the curtains, and she polished it up to brilliance for a bracelet. Both were boxed up and tied with string. Even though it was curfew, and curfew means you could be shot on sight for being outside. And they could be arrested if they weren't shot. Her brother looked out carefully and then ran around the building to the door to the neighbor's house. Now it was like a semi-detached. Okay, so they shared a common wall. Okay, so her brother ran around, pulled the doorbell. You pulled the pull to ring the doorbell, and set the gifts at the doorstep and ran back home. And then they listened through the wall. Even though it was curfew and they could both be arrested, her brother looked carefully, then ran around to the other door. He set the gifts on the doorstep and rang the bell, and then dashed for home. Through the common wall, they could hear the family open the door. Who's this? Who's calling in? It's supposed to be, nobody's supposed to be out. Who's ringing the doorbell? And then, Sinterklaas has come. Well, the children opened their gifts, and they could hear the laughing. Can you imagine as the girl put on her new bracelet and the young boy strutted around feeling like he was out at a special party. Sometime later, their own doorbell rang. And on the doorstep was another box. And inside were 4 small cookies. Real ones. Fresh ones. They hadn't seen cookies for years. What a gift to share. Their neighbor was a baker and obviously had a few leftover ingredients, or he'd bought them on the black market. Of all the Christmases she has had, that's the one she remembers.
Wow. I've read that and it makes me want to cry, Ken. I published this book. I've read it 15 times.
It's hard to read sometimes, but I think, wow, that's why we should study history.
Yes.
Look at what a triumph of spirit. Oh, and if you read the rest,
yes,
you'll find the resistance to oppression in
absolutely
even the smallest things that some teenage kid could offer. You will not dominate us. You will not dominate us. And that's why we need to read history. So.
And why do you think that's important, Ken, going forward in terms of, not being dominated, not being told no, and this survival sort of mechanism? Why does that matter?
Well, we cannot survive individually. The people will survive together, or they will fail together. And if there are community obligations that you owe to people you do not know personally, and that the community is stronger for your implementing those things, you need to care. You need to be compassionate. And it doesn't cost an awful lot to be nice to other people. And Well, that's why we have to do that. Quite apart from the skills that older people know, I can tell you that there are few that know how to can and preserve food. We are looking at a COVID situation that is, and coming after that, there's going to be climate change that is going to disrupt food supplies. We need to learn how to do skills that were commonplace for your grandparents. Everybody knew how to can tomatoes. What? You don't? Well, ask them, they'll tell you. Ask them to help you do it, and that would be better. So.
Ken, what would you like to say to those people who continue to defend our freedom today?
Oh, I met somebody that was selling windows in northern Ontario, not northern, just up the other side of Huntsville. And he said he was selling windows. And we came to the end of our conversation. I said, where'd you go to school? Oh, Kazakhstan. Oh, really? Really? That was where he went to school earlier there. He went later to Berlin. Really? Holy smoke. What did you study? Oh, I have a PhD in nuclear physics. And you're selling windows. Right, well, you know. I said, tell me about your experience here. Oh, he said, the thing that Canadians do not treasure is their freedom. They don't value it. And we do have freedoms. Well, he said in his home country, you didn't argue about anything. People have fought and died to keep us free. And their story needs to be remembered and told and sanctified. And we need to remember that every day. And again, through the study of history, you make that a daily experience. And that is a good thing. We do need to honor those men. Those men and women, they don't have a memory problem. They lived it. Their problem is sometimes trying to forget it. We cannot let that happen. It takes one generation to fail, and we have a duty to maintain that act of remembrance.
Ken, you talk a lot about the word duty in your series of the duty's son, duty's daughter, and duty's dad.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same sense to your own family to preserve that history and to share it with them, that is your duty to them and that's what you're going to leave behind?
Yes. That's what grandparents can do. They can write stories. When I retired, I got into genealogy. I do not recommend it to anybody that wants to preserve their own life. It will draw you in like, oh. Anyways, I created the family genealogy, and I was so proud. It took me almost 10 years to do that.
Amazing.
And I spread it to all the far-flung members of the family, and my daughters looked at it one day and said, Dad, I'm sorry, but this is pretty dull. And I thought, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I get so wrapped up in it. So I thought, I am the world expert on these people. Nobody knows them like I do. It's my job to make them interesting. So that's what got me started. And I wrote, this is my great-grandfather. His picture hangs on the wall.
Amazing.
And so I wrote about him, and then because I also knew this is his father, and this was his sister. So, but they all had a job, okay? And the job was to not only survive, but improve things for their family. And they did. And I sort of treasure that memory. So when you You know, you got membership in this family, you got membership in this nation. It comes with a duty. Not only should you clean your sidewalk, you should preserve your history.
Right, yes. And
anyway, it's the way I see it. And it's not an onerous task. It's a joyful thing to do.
Absolutely. And your joy comes through in all of your books. So thank you for writing them, and thank you for having such a sense of duty in terms of, you know, what you need to do and what needs to be done by everybody in terms of taking care of each other and being kind to each other and remembering the freedoms that we have because of others.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited that you were here to talk to us today. Thank you so much, and we can't wait to share this with everyone. And it is Remembrance Day, so if you'd like to say any closing remarks, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I can remember Remembrance days from that big, and they were sober moments, and I remember a lot of the, you know, the parades and the martial music and the hearing taps and so on. Nobody ever recognized the women who stayed home, who waited and waited and waited. That's something that we should honor as well. That there are a lot of people who weren't in the parades whose contribution was fully as worthy of our honoring today. So. And
thank you for your contributions, Ken. It was a pleasure. And if you want to learn more about Ken's books, you can visit pandamoniumpublishing.com/shop. They're all on there. And we hope that he'll come out with some more soon.
Oh. Don't ask a senior for a short story.
Thanks so much for being with us, Ken. Happy
Pleasure.
Remembrance Day.
Indeed.